whether it's Josh Pate's post-spring top 25 rankings, he, clearly makes a distinction between power ratings and rankings. I actually preferred when he just stuck to the power ratings because the JP poll's pretty unique, I think pretty interesting. It's accurate and it gives insights. His power ratings are much different from his rankings, though. I've never seen him release rankings before, and he did because he said a user challenged him. He had Georgia at 11th, and I see other people talk about how they're concerned about Georgia and all they lost, and they wonder if Gunnar Stockton is good, and they just don't have a whole lot of faith in Georgia. Not just in the team, but I almost would like to say in the program to a certain degree. I don't know why that's the case. I don't. They're college football's number one program. They have 2 national titles and a 53-5 record since 2021. And with how they've recruited, the fact that they just put 13 players in the NFL draft, and they put a lot of players in the prior draft, in the draft before that, they set the record for 15 players taken in the 2022 NFL draft, and the following year, after 2021, when they sent those 15 players and several first-rounders, they won it all again. This is a wonderful program. It's the program that I think right now is the closest thing to the prime Nick Saban program in Alabama. I don't even know if it's close to that because it's a different era of football, and Nick Saban at Alabama was elite, a legend, the greatest coach of all time. But I think that selling on Georgia right now is a mistake, especially when I have listened to several Georgia fans and when I have done my own research and pretty much have come to the conclusion that this may have been the worst Georgia team since 2016. If not that, certainly in the bottom half of Kirby Smart Georgia teams. And the injuries, the tough schedule, all these different things. I think Carson Beck not being a leader in the locker room, all these things piled on top of each other. And you saw Georgia get blown out by Ole Miss. You saw them nearly get de-pantsed by Alabama. They come back. Ryan Williams makes an amazing play. And then Beck throws, I think, the 3rd or 4th interception of the game. It's just, it was an insane season for Georgia last year. They were a weaker team. They were a weak team by their own standards, and they still won the SEC. If that is not a testament to how powerful that program is and how great that program is, then I don't know what is. If you are a Georgia fan, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, like this video, and also comment your thoughts down below and let me know whether you agree or disagree with my defense of Georgia and the 2025 Georgia Bulldogs. I think you're going to like this segment because when I look at the Bulldogs, when I observe their roster, there are some reasons why they could fail. I mean, I don't think Josh Pate is totally out of his mind. I don't think he's, taking drugs or hard drugs entirely. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I don't think so. Pate's a pretty respectable guy. He's one of the best in the business, and his story is admirable, and I like his connectedness with coaches. Sometimes don't like how I think that prevents him from being overly critical, but, there are trade-offs to everything in life. I understand his skepticism about Georgia and the fact that their O-line kind of fell apart at times last year, that they couldn't run the ball, that Carson Beck was, I think, still clearly better than Gunnar Stockton overall as an individual player, and he leaves for Miami. And then Georgia returning only like 45, 44, 43, mid-lower 40s percentage in returning production. They'll probably be a bit higher than that when Bill Connolly releases his post-spring returning production rankings, which maybe he already has, along with his S&P Plus, because they got, Elo Madozi, Josh McCray, Josh Horton. They got Walt Claire Flynn. Pretty cool name. That might be the all name team right there. Walt Claire Flynn, I believe, is his name. Center from UCF. And they got some other players too, and their receiver core is nice. But there are reasons to believe why Georgia may fall. However, I think there are better, more compelling reasons for why they won't. Let's go through why Georgia may fall. So what Georgia lost after 2024 was quite a bit. Carson Beck in his career averaged 8.6 yards per attempt, 58 passing touchdowns. He had several interceptions, 7,912 passing yards. He's just up and down in his career, really was. And you saw that from 2023 to 2024, where the schedule got harder. I think he missed Brock Bowers. I think he missed Ladd McConkey. And he was just not the same player whatsoever. I mean, he had 6 interceptions in 2023, 12 in 2024, and then threw 2 in 2021 when I believe he was a true freshman or a freshman, a much younger player, of course. As a starter, he threw 18 interceptions in his career, and 67% of those came last season. He went off to Miami. You look at where Georgia struggled last year. The injuries piled up. Depth was shaky in the trenches, and they could not run the football. I remember Mykel Williams was out for a few games dealing with some injuries. I know that, Jared Wilson was an All-American center last year, but I know that Tate Ratledge and some other players were consistently banged up there. And against Kentucky or Alabama or, even Auburn or Ole Miss in particular, Georgia Tech, where Georgia was, I think, shut out for a half, I want to say, and it's not like Georgia Tech's defense was all that good. It's well coached, but didn't have a lot of talent on it. You saw the inconsistency everywhere. That was mainly the offense, but you saw it on defense too. I mean, if Ole Miss just had either more blue chip talent or, more likely than that, a better developed offensive line, they wouldn't have kicked all those field goals, and it could have been 45 or 41 to 10 rather than I believe it was 28-10 was the final score in that game. It could have been even worse there. Ole Miss kicked a bunch of field goals. How good will Stockton be is a big question, especially when they lose as much on the offensive line as they did, like Tate Ratledge, Jared Wilson. Defensively, Georgia has lost its luster over the past 2 seasons. I'm not saying as a program it has. They still develop NFL players well. But when it comes to some aspects of development for college play, like being a great college player, not just having, developed potential for the pros, there's been a little bit of shakiness there. According to ESPN's defensive efficiency ratings, Georgia hasn't had a top 10 defense since 2022. They were in between 10 and 15 in the placements both this past season and the season before that in 2023. Last year at times was painful. Remember when Jackson Dart threw that pick, got hurt, Georgia went up 7-0, and then Austin Simmons had to come in? Austin Simmons, I believe, was a true freshman or redshirt freshman. He came in, darted up the defense, tied it up 7-7, then Dart came back in, and it was just a wash. Ole Miss at certain points figured out that defense. Think about the Alabama game. Remember how bad that Alabama offense was toward the end of the year? Michigan, Oklahoma, they got pressure on Milroe. They read him like a book, didn't allow him to average more than a 1-to-1 TD-INT ratio against him. Oklahoma had more defensive touchdown passes from Jalen Milroe than allowed offensive touchdown passes. Milroe didn't throw a single touchdown pass in that game, but threw a touchdown pass to the other team, to Brent Venables' defense. That offense from Alabama, and it helped that it was early in the year, they just tore Georgia's defense apart, completely tore it apart. And I think that entering this season, there is a question where they continue to lose a ton of picks, lose a lot of guys. Their portal evals and QB evals have not, blown other teams out of the water or haven't, really been all that successful. So maybe they'll fall off even more. And overall, when you have 13 players drafted and return less than half of your production, the numbers say you are going to regress. However, I think there are more compelling reasons to support the fact that Georgia won't fall off. It's not that I'm thinking Georgia will definitely get better. I also just don't think they'll definitely get worse. I think we have to wait and really see what happens here, but there should be some optimism. Number one, the schedule is easier. It's much easier than last year. Georgia has to go on the road to Tennessee to open up conference play, but Tennessee loses a lot. I mean, Tennessee is definitely going to regress more than Georgia. Last year, if Georgia played Tennessee on the road, I don't know if they win that game. This year, I'm completely confident they will, because they've out-recruited Tennessee, they've out-developed Tennessee, and Tennessee lost their starting quarterback, and I imagine that Tennessee's downgrade from their starting QB to whether it's Joey Aguilar or maybe Merklinger or whoever's going to win that QB job might be worse. It could be, not guaranteed, might be worse than Beck to Stockton. After that, they have a bye, but then they host Alabama at home. They host Kentucky at home. They host Ole Miss at home. They have to travel to Auburn, which will be tough, but Georgia has not lost to Auburn since 2017. Florida, once again, neutral site. Texas is at home. Georgia Tech is not in Athens. I forget if it's in one of those domes down in the south, like the Mercedes-Benz Dome, or if it's actually at Georgia Tech. So that may be more of a challenge, but the schedule overall aligns more to Georgia's interests in terms of winning games, maximizing their chances to reach the playoffs, and being healthier. Oh, there's also no Clemson in the non-conference as well. So it's a much, much easier schedule. They continue, however, and I think almost more importantly than that, because the schedule is still tough, Georgia continues to be the apex recruiter. Over the past 5 classes since 2021, because there are still some redshirt seniors, they have the 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, and 2nd ranked recruiting classes. Only top 4 classes. They had the number 1 overall class 2 cycles ago. So that class is now going to start to play some more and really mature and age in. And they've had 2 top 2 classes. So I don't know what more you want from a recruiting standpoint. When you look at a staff standpoint, I have Georgia's staff graded as the 3rd best right now, with the number 1 head coach in America and the number 1 strength and conditioning coach in America. Those are 2 very important positions. The strength and conditioning coach is basically the head coach of the preseason, and then the head coach, actual head coach, Kirby Smart, is the CEO, the manager of the roster, the decider in games, also off the field with who he chooses to be his assistants, coordinators, etc. I mean, we can question whether Mike Bobo's the right OC, Glenn Schumann's the right DC, or any of these other position coaches, but Smart's the best in the business. He knows what he's doing. And the current roster talent, combined with that coaching, this is a byproduct of both recruiting and coaching and development. It's crazy. I mean, last year the Bulldogs had the 2nd most talented roster per team talent composite. They're doing a better job of holding on to their talent and developing it than Alabama, who's the only other team that's ahead of them. They've out-recruited basically everyone else besides Alabama in recent history. And they return alien players, especially on defense, or potential aliens at least. Think Christian Miller at D-tackle, Gabe Harris at D-end. I think C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson are awesome. And K.J. Bolden started and played in games as a true freshman, or maybe not started, but he was certainly in the rotation there. Georgia, they bring back so many good players. I think highly of Nate Frazier. Pairing him with McCray is going to be helpful for that running back room. And then whether it's Monroe Freeling, who was highly recruited out of high school, Ernest Green III, you have Micah Morris, Drew Bobo, who played at center at times last season. I think their O-line has talent. And then Noah Thomas, Colby Young, Zachariah Branch are great players with high upside at wide receiver. Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky have been highly recruited, and they bring back a receiver in Dylan Bell who's had some production. So I observe, also don't forget about Dalen Everett, 5-star out of high school, who's played well at corner. They have a plethora of potential alien players, one of the best staffs in the country. They have staff continuity as well. They retain their DC, OC, majority, if not all of their analysts. I think basically the same thing with their position coaches head coach, strength and conditioning coach. They didn't lose a ton to the portal. I think that Elo Mendoza, for example, is probably a equivalent D-end to Damon Wilson, maybe even better, and probably a better cultural fit. Being from a service academy, you think kind of discipline, for example. It's not me saying anything bad about Damon Wilson, by the way, at least explicitly. It's just me saying that, you get a guy from Army who's worked himself up. Wilson was a 5-star out of high school, I think wanted to get paid more. Different priorities. Mendoza's priority, I think, better fits what Georgia wants. I think there's a lot of reasons, more reasons, and very compelling reasons to believe that they're not going to fall off a cliff, especially when you consider that Oklahoma and Florida and LSU and Alabama were ahead of Georgia in, for example, Pate's post-spring top 20 rankings. I understand Alabama. I love Kalen DeBoer. I think that their talent makes it a requirement that they can be, potentially better than Georgia. Florida, I don't entirely get, but then again, if DJ Lagway's Cam Newton or Vince Young or, Johnny Manziel, it doesn't really matter. They'd absolutely then be top 10, especially with, all the veterans they have. But LSU and Oklahoma, I don't get that placement at all. And you see it with others too. I mean, there was one point where I had Georgia ranked pretty low in my preseason. Obviously, this isn't my ranking show that I'm doing. And a week from now, so next Wednesday at the latest, I will be revealing my own top 25, and you will see where I have Georgia. It's higher than a lot of people, that's for sure, because I think Georgia still is one of the best programs, one of the best coached teams, one of the best teams in the entire country. They're absolutely national championship contenders, and I would say top 2, top 3 at the worst in the SEC entering 2025. Remember, they were very bad last year. A lot went wrong for them. Georgia regressing to the mean means they get better. They continue on that trajectory there. Regressing to the mean does not mean they get even worse than last season, because last season was bad. A lot went wrong. Quarterback getting worse despite having a phenomenal year prior. Tight end not, reloading as much as you would expect with how they're coached and developed. The O-line having the issues it did. The rushing attack being the worst it's been perhaps of the entire Kirby Smart era. And the defense just having a lot of talent, but having some holes. A lot went wrong for Georgia. Not a lot went right outside of maybe that first game against Texas. Maybe that second game against Texas as well. But I think it's because Georgia takes Texas more personally, and Smart's a better game day head coach and better motivator than Sark is. So Georgia regressing to the mean is actually going to see them have the identical record of last year, or maybe even get better. Now, I could be wrong. There are reasons to sell on Georgia, but I would not advise you to. And I think that this team is still going to be one of college football's best teams. In fact, I would argue you're not going to see the same floor that you saw from Georgia last year. The game that happened against Ole Miss last season, where Georgia did not even look like they were a functional top 15 team, that will not happen ever this year. You can quote me on that. If I'm wrong, then oh well, I'm wrong. But I love Kirby Smart. I think he's the best head coach in the business. And I think that Georgia is poised to once again be a contender in 2025.